you see, of what the universe is going to offer you, what the truth of the reality that we're living in is going to offer you at the next minute. You say, I don't want that. I want mine, from my ego, from my view of my goals, from my hope, from my private life, from my private ego, etc. And you don't want what really happens. That's kind of funny when you think about it that way.
It is.
Like, you don't want what really happens? Well, no. I have this idea. It should have been this other way. It should have been different. And it's only natural that we have some of that going. It's when it's too much that we have a life that has too much suffering in it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of unnecessary suffering. And it's really good to discriminate between necessary suffering and unnecessary suffering. I think you wouldn't be a human being if you didn't get some suffering. Like you know, I think you'd be kind of strange if you didn't, if something like really awful happened and you didn't feel that.
Yes,
you know
definitely.
What I mean? I don't know if we want to be human beings like that, but there's a lot of unnecessary suffering that just does, there's no valid reason for suffering. And where that line is between necessary and unnecessary suffering varies a lot. Some people, their threshold is really low, and they'll just suffer almost everything because they have such a fixed attitude about how life should be and how it isn't that way. There's no surrender in it. Surrender is letting life be the way it is and taking it, you know, as it comes, right? And being kind of liberated from holding on to things being one way or another. And that gets rid of a lot of suffering when you surrender a little bit. And you cultivate a little bit of surrender. Sometimes it's hard to surrender.
What if you're the kind of person who makes people suffer? That wants to put suffering.
Stop, definitely.
Yeah, well,
who wants to do that? Okay, I have something to say about that.
Because there's just some mean people out there.
It's frustrated love. That's what it is. It's frustrated love. It goes like this. I love you. Oh, she didn't get it. I really love you. Oh, she didn't get it. No, really, really I love you. Why don't you listen to me? She still doesn't get it. If you don't really get it, I'm going to be pissed off. She still doesn't get it. And then it's like, gah, I'll somehow get this across. It's so frustrated. I'll build up the energy behind it. I'll build up the energy behind it so strong, I'll have anger. And
That's
that'll
not
break
love.
Through the barrier, right? No, it's frustrated love. It's a failure to get the original love across. It's frustrated. It's incomplete. There's been a barrier, you know, and you try to break down barriers. And the person who stabs the other person is so totally wrecked around love that that's the expression. It gets contorted, it gets transmuted into something ugly. And I think that's really a big piece of it, right? If I'm critical, that's the message. That's what I want you to join me at. That's a hard one to find a place to get to. But sometimes it's necessary, you know. But there are some that are just like, you got it, man. This is easy, almost, to get to. If there's a sense of openness. A sense of openness is one of them. Like if I talked about openness for a few minutes, pretty soon you'd be going, oh yeah, openness, openness, openness. And you'd be kind of getting this thing I was trying to communicate about openness, which is like, well, obviously there's not holding anything off. There's a relaxed feeling.
It's kind of like light or something. It's like this warm sort of glowy, fuzzy kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, there's this, there was this guy, Master Subramania, and he's a very articulate yoga teacher that I connected with a little, probably in the 70s. And he said something that was really interesting. He says about communication. He said there's two kinds of communication that people do. One is like, I've got this baseball, and I'm going to toss it over to you, and you're going to catch it. And that's communication. So I have a thought, and I want you to get it, so I toss it over to you, and I hope you get it. And if you drop it, it's your fault. you know, or
Too
maybe it's
bad
my
for you.
fault.
Yeah.
Too bad. It's a problem. We'll solve it. But it's definitely like you're over there and I'm over here, and I toss something across to you, right? And we're not getting closer, sort of. Information's being exchanged, so there's a certain sense of reality improving, you know, the sense of common reality, sense of understanding is evolving. He says there's this other kind, and he says, imagine it this way. Imagine that everything already exists. All states of consciousness already exist. They're just laid out somewhere in some space, right? Just an imagination. You don't have to like get into the reality of it or that. But he says in that there's a kind of communication which is and these things are like islands, like, or, you know, places. Like it's a giant archipelago of states of consciousness, this vast thing with every possible one. And I happen to be standing on one of these. And I'm inviting you to join me for a moment on that one, which means I'm inviting you to join me in that experience at this moment, and that's actual communication, is when, and so if I come from that place, it's different than if I'm just lobbing baseballs across. You know what I mean?
That is the exact thing. That's the difference.
That's the difference. So it's like if in order to do that, I got to get clear about where I'm standing, and I have to be standing on one that I want to share. Otherwise, I don't put much effort in it. And so I'll try to go to that place, and then I invite. There's an invitation. Can you get that? Can you feel that? Do you get it? What I'm getting? And that at some point that can happen, and you go, wow. And if it's a really good place, then you have an experience of some kind, right? You have an emotional change, or your clarity, or something like that occurs. And so
you're connecting.
Yeah,
it's allowing someone to connect with you.
Yeah. And the real deal is the connecting, as opposed to what particular part of information happens to be shared at that moment, being shared at that moment. Like it could be about anything. And it's like the information content in that kind of communicating isn't as important as the connection, the unity at that point, where we get each other. You know what I'm saying? And so some of these islands are more conducive to that contact than others, like talking about the truth of our existence is one of them. And so that becomes what gets articulated, what is shared as a religion. In theory, that's what we're supposed to be doing with a religion, I think, is to find those things that are ways which we can find that common point of contact. Whereas that dissolving of the separation between us and being connected